Hello, welcome to the Business of Slow Travel, the first webinar in a series of webinars where we will be exploring the ins and outs of slow travel as a business. So in this session, we will go over several different topics such as slow travel customer, the role of destinations, marketing tactics and trends, and many more. So if you are wondering who I am, my name is Lucia Prieto, and I will be moderating this session today. I work at the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, but I am also here representing the MIT Network, which is an association of Mediterranean protected areas that are developing ecotourism products that not only have a low ecological footprint, but also help the local communities that live near those protected areas. So I want to thank you very much for joining us today. We are live streaming this webinar on UnTours and Travel Massive channels. So right now that you are all joining us, I invite you to drop a comment and let us know where you are joining us from so that we can create a mental map of the slow travel community that is here with us today. So for those of you that are new here, this webinar is part of the Slow Travel Network, which was launched recently a couple of months ago as a way to highlight outstanding ways in which travelers and the tourism industry are making the world a better place through slow travel. So what is this Slow Travel Network? Well, you can all join this network. It's free to join and it's very simple to do so. You can just go to Travel Massive search bar and put Slow Travel Network and just hit the join button. I also have Maria here with me that is helping on backstage, and she will share a link that goes directly to this network so that you can find it easily. This slow travel network is powered by UnTours, which is the first B Corp in the world, and is also supported by Travel Massive as well. So yes, that is all for today. I invite you all to post any questions that you have on the comment section, and we will address them at the end of the session. We will have a dedicated part for Q&A, and we will try to answer all of your questions. So with this in mind, I think it's time to start. And I want to welcome on screen our two guests for today, two special guests, who are Richard Edwards, which is the Chief Marketing Officer of UnTours, and also Alice Ford, who is, among many other things, she will explain that to us, a sustainable adventure travel expert and also a travel writer. So welcome, Alice and Richard. Hello. Before we move on to the nitty-gritty of the webinar, I invite you to please share a couple of words about yourself so that the audience can get to know you a little bit better, and also explain a little bit what is your involvement in this slow travel business.
Richard?
Richard, if you want to start.
Sure. Hi, I'm Richard Edwards, as Lucia said, and I've been in the adventure travel industry a long time. We'll just say it that way, with lots of roles, mostly in multi-day adventure companies, usually as head of marketing, sales, product, or all of the above. And currently, as we also said, I'm the CMO of UnTours, and among some other consulting things.
Great. Alice, what about you?
Yeah, well, first of all, welcome everyone. It's really exciting to be here again to talk about slow travel. My name is Alice Ford. I'm an adventure filmmaker with a long-running show that I do on YouTube about adventure travel, national parks, sustainable and eco travel as well. I also have a travel platform that's more of like a boutique travel agency called Travganic, where we do specifically sustainable hotels and tours as well. And among other things, I'm also a Stuntwoman and live in Los Angeles, but definitely spend most of my time promoting sustainable travel and adventure travel on all my social platforms. And really excited to be here and tell everyone about slow travel.
So we have two very special guests. So I guess that the first question is, what is slow travel? Is that even a thing? What is that?
Yeah, I think it's hard to define. I would say I think what we're really talking about is slower travel. It's slowing down. Um, for so long, travel has been about how many things you can see, how fast you can see them. Uh, Trips where you're just ticking off boxes and uh, and and I think a big reason we started the slow travel network was to get away from thinking that that mindset of showing how many things you've seen and trying to see as much as you can in the shortest period of time is the way to go, and really the way to have memorable travel experiences to slow down. Just slow down and be in whatever destination you're in, and and um, take a few breaths, look around, be a part of it, figure out who's living there, figure out the history, and understand where you are, and in a deeper way. So I think there's no mm, perfect definition of slow travel. That this is what it looks like, and this is what it looks like for everybody. It's more about just taking a little bit more, anywhere from a little bit more time to a lot more time to be in a place. That's sort of my thought.
Yeah, and I'll echo that as well, and also add to that a little bit. In my travels, I do a lot of nature-based wildlife stuff, and I think kind of the key component of that is being slow, being mindful of your surroundings, really like listening and taking in the place that you're in. And if you happen to be in a very cultural or rural place, getting to know the people that are there. And I think those all go hand in hand so much with slow travel. And for me, especially, I think responsible, sustainable travel also goes hand in hand with slow travel, being really mindful about where you're staying, what kind of activities you're doing, and how your footsteps are affecting the place that you're in, and getting to know the local cultures and local foods and things like that too.
So I guess that sustainability, having a purpose also and connection can be some of the key ingredients of this slow travel way. Um, Great. So do you think that right now this is becoming like a big thing, that people are looking for slow travel more and more, people and businesses also?
Yeah, I certainly do. I definitely, I mean, there's been a lot of like buzzwords lately. We've got regenerative travel, we've obviously got sustainable travel. These things are all taking off, and I think all of these things really are slow travel. It's the type of travel where you're not just, as Richard said, going to a bunch of destinations and saying, oh, okay, check, 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 I was here. You're saying, oh, okay, I'm going to go here, I'm maybe going to do a homestay, or I'm going to camp or glamp, or just do things a little bit differently, spend a little bit more time in the destination so you can actually see what the people are like, the culture is like, and give back to the community rather than big corporations or um, you know non-locally owned places. And I think that so many more tour companies, hotels as well, are jumping into this movement right now to support their communities, give back to wildlife conservation in a lot of scenarios as well. So I think definitely I've seen a lot of places and people jumping into this, and I hope it continues as well.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing it. I think I am personally. I know that my own travel habits have evolved over the years, um, and I think I just sort of accidentally became a slow traveler. I got, I just um, the moving around piece just became less and less attractive, and finding out that you could stay for a month on one island in Greece and have, and be a part of that community, and 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 that was going to be a better way to relax. It was going to be lower impact on the destination. You're making a contribution to the destination. um, it's built in to me. It's built into it, and sustainability is built into that. You're not really sometimes you're not really consciously infusing your trip with sustainability. It's that is the model. That's what happens when you're support being in a community and supporting local businesses just by being there. It happens in a really natural way. And that had already, for me, that had already happened personally as a traveler when I this is kind of the time I would talk a little bit about UnTours. I had always heard of UnTours, and many of you have maybe heard of UnTours. You didn't know what it was. It's been around for 50 years. It's sort of, as far as the industry goes, the slow travel pioneer, and in so many ways, as Lucia mentioned in the beginning, it was the world's very first B Corp, and that model of slow travel, that's what UnTours is. You stay 1 week in one place. We kind of recently came up with a way to, we think, an easier way to explain that, and say pack once as a tagline, because you're going and you're staying in one place, you're not packing once, and you're not packing and repacking. And that was how, that is the trip model since the 70s. And so I think I kind of came together with the business that was doing that, as I, at the same time that I was figuring out that is the way I personally wanted to travel. So it's been a nice marriage. That's what I'd say.
So you were explaining a little bit about UnTours, and Alice, you were also speaking about small accommodations. So do you think that there are some specific components that are part of the slow travel business model, or not?
Yeah, I do. I think that, and I'll let Richard talk about UnTours a little bit more. But I think, if you happen to be listening and you're a travel company and you're wanting to get more into slow travel, I think that anything that really puts people with community members is a really nice way to incorporate slow travel. I mean, I realize not everyone is a multi-day tour company. Not everyone maybe owns a accommodation type of place. But if you can incorporate any sort of homestays into your business model, or even camping or glamping that allows people to really interact with other locals, because obviously those types of places are places where you're going to see a lot more locals as well. And also with day tours, things that incorporate history, culture, learning about local gastronomy, or other food or drinks. I particularly work with a company in Portugal that just does day tours, but they actually are all about history and culture, and then they actually give back to local charities in the region as well that help with kind of the different impoverished parts of the community. So companies that are giving back, I think, is a really important component as well in the slow travel movement.
Yeah, I think from the operator perspective, it's you're creating deeper relationships with the suppliers that you're using. So as we know, or for those of you listening that might be a accommodation owner, you'd rather have a 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 night reservation than you would a 1 night reservation. The relationship between the tour operator and that supplier is going to be deeper. There'll be more. There's more trust. There's just more interaction, and it just creates a better relationship with that particular accommodation owner and every supplier that accommodation owner is involved with too. The local restaurants in that area, whatever activities are in that area, those are all going to be deeper relationships, and you're going to, as a business, as a tour business, you're going to have a higher priority with those suppliers because you're sending them more business. So I see that evolve into, a smoother, easier to run business, which is something everyone needs as a tour operator, because it's a pretty labor intense business.
Yeah, and I'll just add a little bit to that too. I've definitely seen some accommodations in different places around the world definitely leaning into that, and I think a model that works really well for that is when, like Richard was saying, a hotel either works directly with tour operators to kind of piggyback off of each other, or they create experiences and list them on their website that are actually involved in the community, like, hey, you can also do a farm to table dinner at a local farm if you come stay here as a thing, or you could go and tour a vineyard next door. So I think actually kind of folding those things into your own websites that are promoting other things in your community allows people to stay longer if you're an accommodation, and also support the other local businesses. And obviously that helps everyone in your local economy.
And that makes your client a more important client to those suppliers. It allows them to give them more attention. It turns the client from a commodity when they're just a one-night stay with maybe not too much other involvement in the community, into a real client, a client that you're sharing with those suppliers, and they're feeling that particular person, that traveler, is just as important to their business as they are to your business. That's a completely different dynamic. That sounds pretty subtle, but it just changes the whole dynamic of how everyone involved is working with that traveler.
Yeah, it's a win-win situation at the end. So for a business that is trying to move on to this type of slow travel business, any kind of small tips? You were mentioning some of them that you would say, well, you can start here, for example, to try to improve little by little and not changing everything from one day to another. So any small tips where a business could start?
I think it's really simple. It's just slowing down those itineraries. If you're a company that is normally in your 9-day itineraries, you're sending people to 3 or 4 different hotels, thinking that, letting the traveler dictate to you that they want to see so much in the destination, so you're moving them around and you're trying to please them in that way, instead of using your sales ability to say, hey, slow down a little bit. Instead of 2 2 2, why don't you go 3 and 3 and stay a little longer, and just help people understand that staying a little longer in each place, maybe it's not to the extreme of an UnTour where you're staying for a whole week in one place, but it starts to incorporate a lot of the things that we're saying, where your clients become more valuable to that place. They're able to see more in that place. And what I found as working with a lot of different companies is you progress. People end up saying, well, I guess I just want to stay in one place the whole time. They'll move to that. They'll find out that slowing down is really a better way to go. And it does create some issues as far as being able to show what your value proposition is as the operator when they're only staying in one place. But when you start talking about the experiences you can create and the relationship you can create with the local suppliers, it's just a different way of seeing that itinerary instead of just relying on the fact that you're finding 3 or 4 different accommodations for them and saying that that's the value that you bring to the table. The experience development is at least as much work to create and more satisfying, I would say.
Yeah, I agree. I think creating those local experiences is a huge key. And if you have, local operators outside of your accommodation that can fill that gap for you, that's great. And I'll also add to that, if you're a accommodation or even a tour company, also start kind of looking at your supply chain. And this is more on the business, not the customer side, but see how you can, buy more things locally and work with other local suppliers rather than places that are far away. Not only will this help you build better connections with the other local businesses in your area and support your own community, but that will show, in a huge way to your customers after you've set up and kind of created those relationships too.
I would say one big actor that we haven't talked about yet in this that becomes an actor when you move into slow travel are the destinations, the destination management organizations that they're much more excited about having a company with clients who are staying longer in their place. They're more invested. There's more support. Since moving over to slow travel and having conversations with the tourism boards and DMCs and demos, those conversations are much smoother. They're more excited about having a week-long traveler in their place than they are a 2-day traveler for just for logical reasons. So I think that's another really big piece, because those relationships, if you're not one of the biggest players in the in the adventure space, the tourism board is usually not going to be able to justify spending so much time with you as a business. But if you're bringing people in for a good long time, then you're going to get financial support, you're going to get marketing support. That relationship just becomes really easy to develop and grow with a valuable partner.
Yeah. So speaking about destinations, can any type of destination become a slow travel destinations? I was thinking mainly about, for example, Las Vegas or some places in Spain that are full of mass tourism. So do you think there is a space for slow tourism in every single place?
Yeah, I mean, there's locals in every single one of these places. So there are, people living a slow lifestyle, even in Las Vegas. I actually just drove through Las Vegas yesterday. I think you have to be a bit more mindful about what you're choosing to do in kind of these bigger destinations. Also, like when you're traveling, where you're staying, and let's be real, you can't always travel slow. No one's going to be able to be a slow traveler all the time everywhere they go, especially if you're like a business traveler um, or you're just maybe going somewhere for the weekend. But I think we can all be better, more mindful travelers in what we're supporting, where we're putting our money and things like that. But I'm sure even in Las Vegas, there are ways in which you can interact with the local community there. You can maybe stay in downtown Las Vegas or North Las Vegas or out in the Red Rocks and not on the Strip. But yeah, absolutely anywhere in the world can be a slow travel destination.
I think since what we said in the beginning, it's slower travel. It's not that would be a confusing way to label this, but that's really what it is. We're talking about, because what is slow? Slow, what's slow for one person is fast for another.
Yeah.
So yeah,
That also happens when speaking about no impact, or I mean, you always are going to have some impact. You are trying to have less impact, no, nothing at all. So yeah.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't put Vegas as the poster child destination of slow travel ever. But I think the concept that we're talking about just slowing it down and trying to make a contribution to the local economy in a meaningful way can be applied anywhere for sure.
And what would be the main destination that you think of when you think about slow travel? You are saying not Las Vegas. Which one comes to your mind?
I think it's really hard to pick one place. I find that, you know, more rural areas are really great indications of slow travel because there are a lot more things that are, you know, the town already usually is very good at supporting itself. I think, you know, Richard probably has some ideas on this because they have a lot of destinations in Europe that you can slow travel to, but definitely smaller cities or small or big towns, I think, are all great kind of indications of a small travel advancement.
I think I can even expand on that. I think you can be in a big city. I think you can go to Paris as a slow traveler if you're choosing a neighborhood sort of mindfully, that this is a place that I'm really interested in. I'm going to stay here for a couple of weeks. I'm gonna learn the name of the local coffee shop owner. I'm gonna go. Maybe not consciously saying I'm going to go there every day, but that's kind of how it turns out. You become someone that recognize you're recognizing the local shops. You're shopping for your lunch every day, like a Parisian would, instead of going to Costco every few weeks. It's a different lifestyle. You're adopting the local lifestyle. You're feeling and living that culture. You're supporting those businesses that are in that little neighborhood. So yeah, I think for sure you think of rural and nature first when you think of slow travel, but even in big cities, I mean, I can't think of much I'd rather do than spend a week or two in a cute little neighborhood in Paris. I mean, that's also, for me,
Sure.
that's travel as well.
Yeah, I mean, I live in Los Angeles, which you wouldn't think anyone could slow travel here, but you know, I think any local in LA, you have a 1 or 2 mile square radius, and you don't leave that. You have a neighborhood. You stay in your neighborhood. Nobody wants to get on the 405.
So we actually have a question from a viewer, and he says that homestays are great, but what about trekking and long distance hiking? For example, the different caminos, Camino de Santiago, etc. Do you think that that is also considered slow travel?
I mean, I do a lot of this kind of travel. I do a lot of hiking and backpacking. So yes, definitely that's slow travel. You're slowly traveling through the area. I would say the one thing about hiking and backpacking long distance is, depending on the trail, you may not be really supporting the local economy at all because you're not using any local resources. If you can add on, you know, staying in some of the communities on the end or the beginning, I think that's always nice to kind of support the local communities. There are definitely a lot of trails as well around the world where you can do like huts along the way. Like last year, I went to the Dolomites and did some hut to hut hiking. You are definitely embedded in the local kind of mountaineering community when you do that, and getting to eat meals at different places. Like in Nepal, you have the tea houses. I just did the West Coast Trail earlier this summer, which is in Canada. And one of the things you can stop at during the hike is an actual crab shack that floats on the water that's owned by the First Nations tribe that is on that land. So I think there's definitely opportunities for you to support the local community, even when you're hiking and backpacking. But I definitely think that long distance backpacking is a great slow travel movement as well.
And it feeds into your transportation selection. We haven't really talked about that, but getting more creative with how you're getting around can lower the impact walking is not nearly as much impact as a big bus, and that's the kind of the extreme. And when you see what when you talk about the big ugly question in travel, as far as sustainability and impact, it's the flights, and with what we're talking about with slow travel, you're deciding to go to one place, so it's a big ugly flight. It's a big impact, but it's not. You're going and you're staying in one place. You're planning instead of having 4-5 day vacations throughout the year, maybe you're having 1 or 2 vacations that are longer. So that's really eliminating a lot of CO2, and then so that's the big one, lowering your overall your overall aviation footprint. But then also you can be creative about how you're getting around when you're in the destination, and it doesn't have to be completely. It doesn't have to be seasonal. There are a lot of creative ways to move around in the winter, and then and so creative and fun ways that are part of the trip. So biking and hiking and there can be lots of ways to get around that are a lot lower impact than 50 or 60 people on a big bus tour. I think that you're always going to be able to do better than that.
So if you take a long distance flight, or if you go on a cruise ship, you can still be a slow traveler. There are always ways to be slower, at least.
Yeah. I personally, I probably wouldn't go in the direction of big cruise. I think
that's going too far.
That is going too far. For me, it is. I mean, I know there are people that can make that argument, but personally, I can't. But there are a lot of small ship cruise companies. Alice and I have a mutual love of UnTours, and there are others.
Just with them in Alaska a couple months ago.
Yeah, and when you see what Hurtigruten is doing with their ships by refitting them to be amazingly sustainable,
yep.
For us at UnTours, it fits the unpack once definition. You're not, rushing around. When you're on those small ships, you're able to go into either a port and not completely take over a community, or you're not even going into a port. You're just going somewhere where nobody else can go. So that's that can be really low impact if that's managed correctly. So I'd say cruise ships can be there. Personally, I can't get big cruise I can't squeeze it into the definition of
even if you try.
I personally can't. No.
Yeah, I agree. And I will also add, there's a great website called byway.com that actually helps you in booking like train travel wherever you're going. So it's all about like flight-free travel. So if you're going somewhere, even if you're booking an UnTour and you're going to get an apartment in a place, you can use this in tandem with that to kind of figure out all of the places that you can go via train from your one destination that you're going to be staying in. And there's a lot of other resources for that as well if you look for them. I agree, huge mass cruises, not necessarily, definitely not sustainable, and I wouldn't go as far as to say those are slow travel either, but a lot of other options for people to manage the types of transportation they're using as well.
Good comments there.
Yeah.
You have a mutual fan of Byway there, Alice.
I see that.
So we have a viewer wondering why we don't see South Africa as a slow travel destination. Any ideas?
I'm actually not sure, but I would assume that has to do with the Tourism Board of South Africa not having any information on this. Normally, the marketing that we see for destinations is very much dictated by the larger agencies for a destination. So if we're not seeing that, it probably has to do with that local, DMC. and or other kind of like government operators that are dealing with travel and tourism and how they're marketing that to the masses.
Fully agree, because the destination completely lends itself, southern wine focused trips, or I don't see how you
hiking, the nature. There's a lot of ways that South Africa definitely could with the right marketing be a slow travel destination. You have a lot of national parks in South Africa. There is definitely a lot of beauty and community and culture there. So I'm not sure the exact answer for that, but.
So what kind of messaging could South Africa be using to attract these kind of slow travelers? Some marketing techniques that you can think about.
Yeah, just take your time. A lot of the visuals with South Africa's marketing do already lend itself. So I think it's more what you're saying, Lucia, is just changing that wording a little bit. You don't need to see all of South Africa when you come. You take this beautiful piece, slow down, get to know people. I know that most people that I know that go to South Africa do take the time to get to know, a winery owner or someone along the way. So I don't think it would take much. It would be a small tweak, and I think that's the way it is with most destinations that haven't embraced this yet. It's not a lot of them have, but I would say the ones that haven't, it's you have visuals. You're trying to entice people to stay and show those beautiful panoramic shots of your destination. So I think the wording just needs to lend itself better to taking the time to really take all that in, like Alice does.
Yeah, and I think I just saw he asked a second follow-up question kind of on I'm not sure what his company is, but if you are a company that is trying to promote slow travel in any destination and you're wondering why maybe your larger destination does not promote this, get in touch with your local DMC, your local travel destination manager, whoever that may be, or even the local like county government agencies that might deal with travel or tourism or marketing, and introduce yourself and pitch them your idea of how you could incorporate this better, why it would be beneficial to them. Because if you're wondering, hey, well, I have a slow travel company and nobody's talking about it, or we should transition to this in our community, well, make your voice heard. And I'm sure that if you can share your ideas on why it would be beneficial to customers coming into your destination, they'll be on board just as quickly as you were in creating the travel, the tours, or the accommodations that you did.
And that's just another angle on what we were talking about earlier with creating that relationship. The destinations are looking for people to stay longer, and kind of that follow-up question there was, what kind of companies would be interested? Well, that's the tourism board's job, is to know what companies out there are interested in the destination. So
exactly.
If you're coming up with an idea that they like, and who doesn't like more money spent in the destination at a tourism board, then they're going to match you with like companies that are already working there, companies that have expressed interest in working there, and usually those companies have kind of given some parameters of the type of product that they're looking for. So I've found that to be really true lately, that the tourism boards are either already thinking about this and ready to match you with either do matchmaking for locals or outbound operators, and they're very in tune with the idea of slow travel improving the situation in their destination.
Yeah, and also I've found that every tourism board I've ever reached out to on a business side has been extremely helpful A couple years ago, I was planning a group trip to Sonoma. I called the tourism board there, and they went above and beyond in helping me and sending me brochures and stuff I could give away to my clients, and putting me in contact with anyone and everyone that they could that would make the trip more fulfilling to the people, and putting me in touch with all those kind of local operators and things like that. So they're a huge resource. And if you're a accommodation or a tour operator and you're not using them yet, definitely put that on your to-do list for this week.
Because I would say a lot of operators and people in the private sector are sometimes they haven't had the best experiences getting help from tourism boards and destinations. That's just the reality. Because they're not itinerary designers. That's not what they do. But when you talk about staying in a place, they're experts at that. So the match is just much closer. That conversation is much easier.
Yeah, and speaking, for example, about the channels that slow travel customers are leaning more towards, do you think that is mostly direct booking, a do-it-yourself thing, or are they using more travel agencies? From your experience, of course.
Alice?
I would say that most of that is like people booking stuff themselves, not necessarily using a travel agent. But I mean, there's obviously several different types of traveler, even in the slow travel realm. You know, you have the people that might, for instance, book an accommodation through UnTours, or they might rent an apartment for a month in a place, and then they just kind of go about in the community, and they might not book any tours and or book any sort of experiences. They might just kind of see where the trip takes them. And then on the other side, you have the people that are going to want to book something specific, where maybe they are doing a 7-day tour in Tuscany, or, you know, wherever the destination might be. And they're going to want to book that and have that built in itinerary. So I think you have a lot of different kind of travelers. So it's hard to kind of put one definition onto the typical slow travel person, because I think just like all travelers, we have a lot of variety in that, and there are a lot of people that want to slow travel, but there's a lot of different ways to do that.
I think it's there's been kind of an evolution of information about traveling. First, there wasn't enough information on the internet about things, so that kept travel businesses in business. There wasn't enough detail. Now then I think it kind of peaked. It got like really easy to do it and to get the information you needed, and now it's too much information. Now we have over tourism and over information, so it's really hard to sort through everything. And that's how we trade, as you know, as UnTours, and really the whole sector is your expertise. You're vetting the products that you're offering, and so building that trust with the client that you're giving them the best options, or at least giving them the correct information about the options. That's what the business is based on, and it's always been that way. But I actually think this proliferation of information that's hard to sort through is sort of helps you. It helps you as a travel business to separate yourself from someone having to do it themselves. That's what people, we get lots of people that are just throwing their hands in the air and say, I can't figure it out. Can you do it for me? There will always be a lot of do-it-yourselfers, and they should do that. It's fun if you like to do that, but there are a lot of people that don't.
Yeah, and you were saying, Alice, that there are different kinds of people that can be considered slow travelers. But do you think there's any specific traits that we can find, or for example, an age range that is leaning more towards slow travel, or a gender that is leaning more towards slow travel? Do you think there are any highlights in there, or?
I think you definitely have a large percentage of the over like 55 age that is slow travelers. They're more inclined to not have to move around to a lot of hotels. Um, a lot of them are more interested in learning about history and culture and having those actual deeper connections to local community. But I think you also have a huge share of travelers that are in that 20 to 35 range that are more like a budget traveler that are slow traveling because that's what fits their budget better. um, I think that people of all ages are slow travelers. I think the more money you have, the less likely you are to slow travel. So I do think it's more of a median income or money saving personality trait that makes you want to slow travel more. But I think people that also have more of an interest in having that personal connection when they travel rather than the luxury experience is definitely like a key element of that ideal customer that you're looking for when we're talking about slow travel or regenerative or sustainable travel, any of those.
We actually have some really surprising statistics to me about gender.
Go ahead.
It's just women are slow travelers. So I'm, I guess I'm just in the minority. I've never been at a company that had such a crazy skew toward women uh, as the decision makers, as what UnTours has. They really are driving our bookings, our business in a way that I could never really imagine. There's we're not doing anything, you know, overt to just appeal to women, and yet naturally the slow travel model is appealing more to women. And be hard to try to explain all the reasons, but one of the more recent um, kind of things that we've been able to pull out is families. So what you already have enough to worry about when you're on vacation when you have kids. So when you're packing and unpacking and packing and unpacking with kids, that gets really complicated. But if you can say we're going to go to this place and we have all these things to do and you're going to meet some people, that's an easier sell for young kids, older kids, and the most important, mom. So we're seeing that's a really growing segment that they want to have a vacation too, and they can't have that if they're hurting everyone around, which is what moms end up doing a lot of the time.
Yeah, and I think that the analytics on who is the main decision maker in travel usually is the woman. So it's interesting, yeah, that especially for slow travel, it's the female of the family or women that are more interested in it. But I think travel industry as a whole, usually that decision maker when we're talking about couples or families is usually the woman in the relationship.
We have an interesting question here to you, Richard. Um, he's asking if is it really better to see only one part of the destination for 1 or 2 weeks at a time with 5 different flights, or how do you balance out sustainability in that case? When you were speaking, for example, about not needing to see a whole destination at one time.
I'm not sure if I'm understanding that question. You see one place with 5 different flights.
I mean, instead of seeing the whole destination one time, coming back and using 5 flights to see the whole destination because you are using.
Oh, well, yeah. Right. That's if if you're if your goal is to see that place in every place in that place, and you need to come back 5 times, that's probably not a good balance. I don't think that's what we're talking about. I think what we're talking about is sacrificing seeing everything in a country as part of your vacation. What you're prioritizing some places you really want to see, and and staying there longer instead of trying to go to see everything you could possibly want to see in that place. So yeah, if you're but I guess I don't see the difference if you're going to go back every year, and if a certain country is the one you really want to explore. If you're going back every year and staying longer in one place, you're probably still going to have a lower overall impact if than you would having the same annual vacation for the same amount of time and seeing a lot of places in each destination. I think it's more about the slowing down than the ticking boxes. I would go back to that.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in and add to that too. I think that you don't. I mean, I think it all comes back to how much time you have in a destination. Obviously, if you only have 5 days, you can't see all of South Africa. But if you had a month to spend there, you could see a lot of the countryside in a slow travel way by staying a week in Cape Town, a week in the national parks on the eastern side of the country. You could go for 4 or 5 days to the wine regions, and you could really slow travel around the country. So I think it really depends on how much time you have in a destination. Last year I spent a month in Ecuador. I didn't see every place, but I spent a week in the Galapagos, a week in the Amazon, a week in the mountains, and then a week in Quito in the north, and really slow traveled throughout the countryside. Yes, I changed hotels several times, but I was in each of those kind of regions for a good amount of time to be able to experience the local customs and traditions and things like that. And I think depending on where you're going, it really depends on the amount of time that you have, and to be able to dictate how much you can see and still travel slow.
Yeah. So we are reaching almost the end of the session. So if you have any questions, now is the time. And I do have a final question for you, Alice and Richard. Do you think that there is a risk if everyone start calling their trips slow travel? Do you think that there is already some whitewashing in there or not? Tricky one.
There's always that risk with every. Alice was listing off some of. I'm a great hater of all the terms that pop up. I think travel is travel, and you talk so I would not want to go down the road of arguing about what travel is, what term belongs to what kind of travel. I think and I'd really hate for us in the Slow Travel Network to get lost in that, create an argument where there isn't one. What the whole point is, lowering your impact, improving the positive impact on communities, improving your travel experience, and actually hopefully improving your business's bottom line by adjusting those things to actually saving costs by doing some of these things, and improving your margin by creating unique experiences that other people can't replicate. I think there are only positives in slowing down. I can't think so far. I haven't thought of a negative. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, and I agree, I guess, on the terminology of calling your tour or your experience slow travel. I think it's more important, in my opinion, to define how you're doing that rather than creating some sort of, and sorry for the traffic noise, creating some sort of coined terminology for to create some sort of buzzword. I think it's better for people to be able to see how you're doing that, how you're creating one of a kind experiences where it's not necessarily about the place, but it's about the connections that people had when they took your tour or stayed at your place, rather than saying this is, quote unquote, slow or regenerative or sustainable or, yada, yada, yada. Um,
And I think we have a final question. I think it's going to be the last one. They are asking about, well, we were saying that staying, for example, in apartments for a long time is a good option, but they are saying that some of them are owned by investors, and then the money is not really going to the local community. So it's asking about your thoughts about this.
Richard, do you want to take the lead on this one?
Yeah, it's a tough one.
Yeah.
It is a tough one. I was just talking to someone. I'm here in Japan this week at the Adventure Travel World Summit. So talking to all kinds of people from all over the world about these kinds of things. And I was talking to someone who might be put in this category. He he lives in a Mediterranean country, and he just bought 2 apartments to use as sort of as uh, slow travel apartments. So I guess he would be seen as an investor, but he's a local. He's not some giant corporation or anything. You are benefiting a local family, maybe a local family that's a little bit more affluent than the average. Um, and then I would say nothing's perfect, actually. So there are going to be corporate owned uh, accommodations that benefit from a slower travel model, but what but what we're trying to sort of raise all boats with this, and you're giving a better opportunity for the little guy or gal when you have when the requirement isn't a giant building, it's an apartment or a cottage or a villa. That really levels the playing field. It doesn't make it perfect, but it makes it more fair.
Yeah, and if you're still going out into the community and spending your money with local restaurants and local community members, you're still helping that economy and that community, even if your accommodation isn't maybe locally owned, or even if it's, maybe you're staying at the Marriott for 2 weeks. I mean, you can still travel slow and stay at a hotel, and or an investment house. And honestly, it's really hard to tell sometimes, especially if you're booking something on Airbnb or, VRBO. Some of those are still owned by corporations, and sometimes it's hard to know, but sometimes you might be staying with someone that lives upstairs and they own the whole house. So I think it's kind of hard to figure that out a lot of the times. But if you're still on the mindset of slow travel when you're in the destination and the things that you're doing during the day and the evening, it can make up for that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for those insights, Richard and Alice. If you have any final remarks for the last couple of minutes, a sentence that summarizes the key points of this webinar.
I'll jump in. At the beginning of this, you guys heard that UnTours was one of the first B corporations in the world. If you're not familiar with B corporations and you are an accommodation owner or a tour company owner, I would definitely look into those for your company. This is a great way for you to be able to use the great things that you're doing and the ways in which you are giving back to the community, you are sustainable. If you have these pillars already, this is a great tool for you to be able to prove it to the world by getting B Corporation status. You could also join 1% for the Planet, which is another way to kind of give back. But yeah, I hope that this webinar was helpful. I hope that if you are a business owner that you learned something. If you have questions for Richard or I, you can definitely reach out to me on Instagram or through my website as well. If you've got questions on how to be a better, more responsible company or anything like that.
Yeah, I just think we have an opportunity to have, I don't know, I hesitate to use the word movement. I just think it's a bit of an adjustment that we can make to that isn't as huge of a challenge as aviation fuel. This is something we can do. It's in kind of all of our hands, and it's right there. And if we're all thinking about this, being more mindful, benefiting communities, slowing down, helping people have a better understanding of the places that they visit, which, as we know, any of us who've worked with travelers, sometimes they don't get a great understanding of where they've been, even after they've been there. So making sure that they do, those are all positive steps that we can take as an industry while we figure out the our bigger impacts from flying. So yeah, I just say this is in our hands, and let's keep working on it together.
Well, thank you so much, Richard. Thank you so much, Alice. And to our wonderful audience, we had so many interesting questions. And we will see you in the next webinar because we have more coming soon. And we will keep you updated about that. And please do not forget to join our community, our Slow Travel Network. I'm sure that Maria is helping me on the backstage and putting the link in there. And if not, you can go to Travel Massive and search it on the search bar. So thank you so much and see you soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye bye.